All right, everybody. Thank you for being here this evening. We're going to have an interesting conversation with Athena Laz. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Athena?
That is, thank you.
Oh, Jane, your lifesaver.
So I've just finished reading Athena's book, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. In the 20 years or so that I've been exploring and on my journey, I haven't spent a lot of time with dreams. So this is going to be an interesting evening for me, and I get a chance to ask some questions. But before we get into the details, let me start with maybe a couple little personal questions for Athena. Can you tell us, Athena, a little bit about yourself? I know you're a psychologist. How did you get into that? And maybe what led you into having an interest in dreams?
So my interest for dreaming began when I was much, much younger. I'd say as a child, I often had very psychic dreams and experiences. And I think that led me ultimately to the path of psychology. So when I hit my 20s, I went through a period where I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. And ultimately, I thought the study of the mind, the psyche, helping others, it felt like a really good fit, and it was at the time. And so I decided if I was going to work with people, I wanted to have some backing, some training behind me. And so I went the traditional psychology route, and I'm very glad I did. But I would say my dream work, my love for dreaming, really is in line with intuitive work, which has been with me. I feel my whole life I've been in that, I've been immersed in it. So when it came to kind of deciding what topic do I want to write about, what do I really want to explore, dreaming was one of the pathways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how long have you been in this psychology arena? Was that something that came out of college?
So I've been in I think I qualified when I was in probably around 2014, 2015. And then I was in clinics and private practice and doing a lot of existential dream work with people, but it wasn't my main focus. So whilst I was in practice, it was quite traditional in terms of, especially because, I know we've spoken, but living in South Africa, the population is quite traumatized. And so a lot of the work I did was actually trauma-based work. Didn't have really much to do with dreaming, although trauma can really awaken people to, what it means to be alive, how people map meaning, how to feel safe again. So it all kind of interlinked.
So when you moved to the United States, had you already gotten involved in the dream work, or was that something that arose once you moved here?
No, it happened much earlier than our move. So my husband and I immigrated last year in June, and I was interested in writing a book for a very long time, and that came about for me about 3 years ago. And I wrote the book during COVID and had done a lot of lucid dream practices and dream work privately, still in South Africa, not online. So by the time I moved to the States, my book had already been released. It had been published in a lot of countries. And just from that, I have worked with a large network of people in terms of dream work specific.
Was your first book, The Alchemy of Your Dreams, or was it the second one?
That's the first one. Okay.
I've got a copy of it here. If people look at my image, you can see I just finished reading the book. Fascinating book. If you have a serious interest in dreams or exploring dreams, I would suggest that's a great book to read. We'll talk a little bit later about some other offerings that Athena has if your interest has been spurred by this conversation. So tell us a little bit about, you now focus on dream work, helping people learn how to take advantage of their dreams. Can you talk a little bit about that practice?
Sure. So the work that I do really marries what I like to think of as mysticism and psychology. And so I'm of the belief that when we fall asleep and we dream every night, we dream with our psyches, but we also connect to universal consciousness. And the work that I do is really to awaken people to the fact that our dreams are not these meaningless things that happen to us. Actually, we're participating in something nightly. And the more that you begin to pay attention to the at first the symbolic stories that you experience, the dreams that we have, the more you'll begin to see how much guidance and creativity and solutions and offerings come to you nightly. But very much like a meditation practice, you take your you still take your mind with you, you take your memories with you, you have your psyche very present. And so for anyone who lucid dreams, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, that will very much come up, so I think most people have had the experience where if you've had a really chaotic day, a very stressful day, and then you fall into bed and you're scrolling through your cell phone reading something terrible, and then you go to sleep and you just have nightmares or you have very frenetic dreams, then you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, what does that mean? There's a sort of cleanliness that needs to come into the practice, so that the dreams that you have are clear and not just residue of the day, a frenetic day. So that's a long answer to your question, but that is what I do and how I align myself in this work.
Would you comment on Western thoughts on dreams? My sense is that most other cultures place a higher value on what goes on in the dream state than we in the Western Hemisphere do. Can you comment a little on that?
Sure. I think that ancient wisdom traditions definitely place a lot of value onto dreams. And I think in the West, what happened is that with psychiatry and psychology coming into mainstream consciousness, with thinkers like Freud and Jung, what happened is that no one was sort of paying attention to their dreams, and all of a sudden the Western consciousness, if we can call it that, began to focus and look at dreams in a very specific way. And then we have mainstream media that shows dreams to us in a very specific narrative. Oh my God, you have a dream about this, it means you want to have sex with your mother. It's this Oedipal complex or something, And so I think for a lot of people in the West, it's very off-putting. Before my book came out, my assumption actually was that it was a Western a Western perspective. But the more that I work with people all over the world, and I've had the pleasure of speaking to people from Korea to Italy to all over, that actually I think it's a modern day issue as opposed to it being a cultural one or a East versus West. Because I think in modern living, people are so busy and so frenetic that dreaming just doesn't, to pay attention to your dreams just feels like something else that you have to do. And the thinking behind it now is that, well, if it's just a happening of the mind, it's the it's your biology going off at night, or it's day residue. And I think all these myths that come up in modern thinking that spill into many cultures are very unhelpful, actually. And so I think in the West particularly, we tend to, well, a lot of people tend to focus on that, but I think that's changing.
We talk about in past conversations about an awakening that might be going on.
Right.
And in that awakening, people are looking for new ways to perceive things, that they understand themselves to be spiritual beings, and yet organized religion isn't fulfilling those spiritual needs. So people are looking in other directions. I think dreams dreams are an excellent place to put some attention. So let's talk a little bit of, not specifically about how to dream or how to interpret dreams, but tell us a little bit about what somebody might get out of putting an effort into focusing on their dreams.
I feel like for anyone who is spiritually curious but would like direct experience as opposed to going through someone, right? As opposed to reading a book by a channel or going to a psychic, you can gain that access for yourself nightly. And I feel that that is one of the most amazing experiences that we can have. And we all have an internal system that alerts us. We know we can feel resonance when something is truthful. And I think in dreaming, it's the same. And I think that's also partly why dreams have really fallen to the wayside, because imagine if you told everyone, well, you nightly have access to this universal source of wisdom that you can question, can ask, can gain insight. If you're suffering and you're lost, you can find a way forward. I really fully believe that through dreaming. I think things would be fundamentally different. It costs us absolutely nothing. It's a free practice. You don't need to do or go through anyone to do it, right? So I think the benefits are so vast and so varied, but really for anyone who's interested in experiencing something larger than themselves, dreams really, for me at least, are one of the good pathways to that.
So one of the things that I got out of your book is that there's so much that goes on in the dream state, guidance that's available, but you have to look for it. You have to take these dreams and contemplate them, and you can get answers to things. But if we treat dreams like just an artifact of a long day, then this asset that's out there for us is minimized.
Completely.
So in your book, you talk about, let's talk a little bit about regular dreams. We'll come into lucid dreams later. Talk a little bit about regular dreams.
So we have so many regular dreams, right? From nightmares to symbolic dreams to warning dreams to dreams about, I guess, would we call this just regular dreams about the future? But I mean, every night we go to sleep and we all find ourselves in specific narratives. And for the most part, we're in them when we're dreaming. You know, we really feel like that's what's happening to us. And so I think that the main thing for anyone kind of wanting to pursue this is to say, you know, something that we do in the West specifically is when we wake up, we'll go, some of us will go, what did I dream? As opposed to what was I doing? Right? And I think they're actually fundamentally different questions, because the one is saying, I am the consciousness that still occurs whilst sleeping. The other one is like, I'm doing something, but without awareness. And so they're different for me. The kind of the perception of that is very different. And so when it comes just down to regular dreaming, you're having a normal dream, you don't understand that you're dreaming in your sleep, the most helpful thing you can do is look at it as a story and say, okay, well, what is the story that was playing out? And if I am the consciousness in my dream, let's say I'm all the players, the dream players in my dream that I've just had, what does that mean? And then insights can begin to arise.
Yeah, it seems to me that posing that question has to happen almost immediately upon waking up.
Right.
It doesn't take very long. If my dog is ready to go out and I'm not thinking about my dream, I'm thinking about my dog, where you know what, the dream is gone.
It's so fleeting.
It takes a conscious effort to talk a little bit about journaling.
Sure. So journaling, I think, is one of the most helpful practices that anyone can do. And I think for a multitude of reasons. One, because anyone who reads over a dream journal will see emotional patterns replaying out. And I think that is hugely helpful, specifically if you're struggling with something, because you can just see it so obviously. And so just the act of writing in itself, I think, is therapeutic. But then in terms of being able to recall your dreams, that also begins to prime how much you can remember your dreams simply by writing them down. And I think the more you begin to focus on something, the more your psyche responds back. And writing is really a good pathway in doing that. You know, so for anyone who's very new to journaling a dream, it's really simple. Just write out the symbols that you remember. you know, okay.
Athena, you somehow got muted. There
It
you
obviously
go.
wasn't a good dream. Um, but so, you know, really sort of basic things, just write down as much as you can remember. And then if you need to walk, go, do whatever you need to do, and then come back to the dream, that what you've written in your journal, and just look at it as a bare minimum. That's usually just enough.
So if I wake up at 3 in the morning and this dream that I just had is fresh in my mind, are you suggesting that I turn the light on, pull up my journal and start writing? And after I put the dream down, I can turn the light back off and try to get back to sleep?
I think it depends on how dedicated you are, right? I think for you, yes, I would say yes, do that. I think that actually might be hugely helpful because it's waking you up at 3 a.m. You know, I say anything actually that wakes you up in the middle of the night is worth paying attention to, so that you don't have to keep waking up at 3 a.m. You know, moving forward. But I think also it's a wonderful space to you know, those 3 a.m. nights waking up moments are really helpful times to lucid dream.
So it
So
sounds like it doesn't take very long if you put your mind to doing this journaling. Would you say that you more easily remember what went on in a dream, that you start developing a skill at remembering dreams as you start doing this?
yes, that's what I find with most people who tend to do this, that the more they journal, the easier it becomes to retain their and recall their dreams, and the easier it becomes to make meaning of them as well. And something that is quite wonderful that happens to quite a few people is that they'll start to recognize how much they've dreamt of things that end up coming to pass, that end up happening. And that's wildly crazy for a lot of people. Yeah.
I think you might have mentioned in your book an acquaintance of mine, Larry Burke.
Okay.
You know Larry?
I don't know Larry personally. I know his work, I guess.
Yeah. So Larry, you were just talking about dreams providing premonitions or information about the future. Larry did some research. He's a radiologist at Duke. Um, and he was finding that women who had breast cancer, who had not yet been diagnosed with breast cancer, would have very vivid dreams telling them that they had breast cancer, prompting them to go in and see their physician. And in fact, that's where they were diagnosed with cancer at an early stage. So Larry would be one that would echo your comments, Athena, that what goes on in the dream state can be tremendously important.
Very right. And imagine you miss a dream like that. I always think about that. I think what's wonderful as although I probably frighten people by saying that, but what I think is wonderful about those kind of dreams, like those warning dreams, most of if I remember correctly in his book, people woke up and knew that there was a different resonance to those kind of dreams. So they knew that it was something that niggled them in a way that was meaningful. And I think that that is really helpful. I think it's the same thing with intuition or having any form of sort of extrasensory perception, is that it's that gut instinct of saying like, oh, wait, where did that come from? Why am I thinking about that right now? And how is this helpful? And what should I do? I think that's also the thing. You can get a lot of guidance and insight and solutions through your dreams, but if you actually don't take action on them, it's, you know, kind of meaningless.
So can you maybe give us a couple of examples of people you've worked with who have learned something in the dream state that proved to be very helpful for them?
I've had I recently spoke to someone who had a great experience, not with a health issue, but she had a loved one who passed away, and she didn't feel like she had closure. She never had the opportunity to say goodbye, and she felt like she needed to say some things that were unsaid. And she had a very powerful dream in which she saw him and managed to have this closure, and that was deeply healing for her on waking, right? So not exactly like what we were talking about before, but very, very meaningful. And then in terms of dreams that are precognitive or warning dreams, right? I think that's the thing about precognitive dreaming is, or dreams about the future. Most people only remember them when they are very negative. It sounds weird, but you have a dream where something in your dreamscape tells you that you need to go to a doctor and have something checked. That's a frightening dream, and so that's something that most people will begin to pay attention to. But the more you begin to pay attention to your dreams, the more you'll begin to see how much you can dream of that it's just everyday stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the huge stuff that, that's not necessarily a warning dream. I've had clients who were dream group participants who've dreamt about vitamin deficiencies that they were told about in their dreams, and they've gone on to dreamer to go and get checked out, and then they've healed that in themselves. So lots and lots of stories like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think I recall reading about some, I don't know if it's in a lucid dream state, probably in a lucid dream state, but people who practice self-healing within the dream. Do you have any examples of that you could put forward?
Yes, sure. So there are a lot of studies done by, I think it's by Harvard, where they've proven that like in a lucid dream state, you can gain proficiency in specific skills, and you can have radical remission or healing happen. And that's documented. It's not just something that I'm saying. And there are a lot of researchers currently in the US who are doing amazing work on that. But I can share a personal story. I had something called surfer's eye from being in the sun too much. So it just looked like a tiny little lump on the corner of my iris. And the doctor told me that I would eventually need to go for a surgery because that is just something that eventually needs to happen. And so I decided I would try and heal it in a lucid dream. And in the lucid dream, many of the other stories from other lucid dream teachers talk about how someone will appear, you'll be given something to drink or something. And I just put it out to the dreamscape when I was lucid that I wanted my eye to heal. And a water fountain appeared, and I put some of that water in my eye. It didn't heal completely, but it went back drastically. So when I went back to the doctor, he told me that was something that can naturally happen. But the timing of it was quite coincidental because I'd done the lucid dream practice and then went back, I think, like a week or two later. So that's just a personal experience of that. I would say for anyone who has something chronic, if you're dealing with a chronic illness or something that really won't leave you alone, not to dismiss medical practices at all, but if you have an opportunity to heal something through sleep, why not take the chance? Why not see if it works? And like I was saying earlier, what I love about dreaming is it's so experiential, it's so in first person that you will know it because you've actually had the experience yourself. And it's really up to you.
I'd like to get into lucid dreaming, but before I do, I wondered if, Mark, maybe you know how to do this. The people who are online, I wonder what percentage of people participating tonight have had lucid dreams. Perhaps in the chat room, you could just say, I have, and let's see what kind of names, or raise your hand. Sally, Nicole. I guess I could add my name. I've had a lucid dream or two. So that's interesting. I would have thought maybe there'd be more people who would have say they had. A few more. So, well, let's talk about lucid dreaming, and feel free to keep adding
Can I
your
just
names.
ask a quick, yeah, Can you describe lucid dreaming so I know how to answer?
Yeah. Athena, you want to give a definition?
Sure. So a lucid dream is a dream in which you find yourself, okay, wait, let me begin again. A lucid dream is when you are sound asleep, your body is physiologically asleep, and something in the dream alerts you to the fact that it is a dream, and you begin to have consciousness about that. So you go, for example, you find yourself in a dream and you are at your sister's house, and then you walk to the back of the house and you see a massive pool. And in the dream, you think, wait a minute, my sister doesn't have a pool. And in that moment, you realize this has to be a dream. And so from that moment on, you're at the beginning of a lucid dream. So that is, I think, the best way to explain it.
Something triggers an awareness that you are dreaming. I had one brief one where I was flying over a suburban neighborhood and enjoying seeing people playing in their pools and doing things. And all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, I'm flying. This has to be a dream. And at that point, I realized, yes, it is a dream, but I slipped back into a regular dream pretty quickly because I was having so much fun flying through the air that I wasn't able to maintain my concentration.
And I think that's with a lot of people who fall into the lucid dreaming rabbit hole. I can definitely speak about myself in this case, is that that is something that really becomes the challenge in trying to remain as lucid as possible for as long as possible in the dream state.
So there's a protocol, I guess, to follow, or a skill set you develop. It's like any skill. When you first try working with it, you're not very proficient, but if you put some effort into it, you can get better and better at it. So Athena, would you talk a little bit about the process that you outline in your book? How do people switch from a regular dream into a lucid dream?
So I think the very first practice to begin with is to increase mindfulness. So we were talking about how you gave that great example of flying over people's houses and then recognizing, well, hang on a second, how am I doing that? And in that moment, you have this mindful moment, and that self-reflection, that self-reflective question appears, and the dream changes. And so the best practice to begin with is in waking life to really try and increase mindfulness. So for example, if you're standing in a line, to really bring your attention to the present, start to focus on your body. That's a really helpful trigger for lucid dreaming. Look at your feet, look at your hands, and do that as consistently as you can throughout the day. And I stand on the shoulder of many other lucid dreamers, teachers. And so the methods that I outline in my book, what I tried to do was to give as many methods as possible so that at least one would work for a whole lot of people. So I find that for most people, you'll stick to one method and that really, really works well. So a very popular method is going and you just during the day, put your hand up against a wall and push against it and see if your hand goes through the wall. And that quick thing that you can do will surprise you how much that can trigger lucidity. Because if you have a self-reflective question that happens in the dream, oh, my sister doesn't have a pool, I can't be flying, why is there a monkey in my office, right? I'm dreaming. And then the next thing is that test if you're dreaming, see if you can push your hand through something in the dreamscape, and then you'll know you're dreaming, and that usually stabilizes it as well. So I would say mindfulness, but there are a lot of practices that people can do, and they're different practices for different people. So like for the 3 a.m. people who wake up no matter what, there's a practice that you can try and do that will walk your consciousness into dreaming. But it is difficult and requires quite a lot of discipline and quite a lot of perseverance. And so what I like to tell people is don't give up if it doesn't happen quickly. For some people, it happens very quickly, and for others, it takes a couple of months, weeks. And yeah, it's a process. It should be enjoyable.
It's developing a skill set. So now let's just differentiate in a lucid dream, assuming that somebody has developed an ability to hang on to that lucidity, that once you become aware and you've learned how to keep that, maybe talk a little bit about how do you keep lucid in a dream. You talked about how you can push against a wall to verify that you are lucid. How do you maintain that?
I think that is really the challenge and the trick. And I think it's a bit of a paradox, because the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. But like a meditation practice, something can throw you out and you can feel like you're a beginner again. And so something that is very helpful to do is, in the moment of lucidity, you find yourself awake in a lucid dream. Okay, your consciousness is aware again, let's say that, right? That you try and stabilize the dream. You can do that by literally saying stabilize dream. Some people like to turn around in their dreams. That's never worked for me in a lucid dream. I've almost always fallen back into a symbolic dream if I do that. And so a lot of this is trial and error and seeing what works. So for example, the other night I had a lucid dream. And I knew I was lucid dreaming, and usually I can clear the dreamscape, which is part of maintaining lucidity. So I'll go dreamscape clear, and then all the symbols, imagery will generally disappear. And most of them didn't in this particular dream. And I think that is because lucidity is on a spectrum. So sometimes, for example, we're more aware and awake, we're more present in our waking lives. It's very much the same thing in the dream state. So in that dream, because I knew I was losing my lucidity, I was losing my conscious awareness, I tried to push against a wall, and my hand didn't go through it because the dream was very dense. My lucidity was wavering, should I say, but I could push the wall like almost with superhuman strength, and so I knew it. But the dream figures were telling me all sorts of things, and I just knew like I had to stabilize the dream, and it was really difficult. And so I've been doing this now for a long time, and even for me, I will have dreams in which stabilizing lucidity is challenging. And so I'm saying this for anyone because it's just a process. Sometimes it will be very easy and other times it won't. And it really depends very much on how you are in your waking life. The practices that you do, if you're mindful what you consume, mentally, with food, all sorts of things, a lot goes into it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in a lucid dream state, talk a little bit about guidance that one can get.
So this is where I find it to be really a profound state. I think it's very helpful with lucid dreaming to first know that if you're asking for guidance, very much like you wouldn't walk around on a random street in your waking life asking for guidance, that you want to make sure that what you're interacting with is a good and clear landscape, or dreamscape, should we say. So I always recommend that if you can lucid dream and you want to ask for guidance, do it in a way that is clear of symbols and imagery. And so what I mean by that is literally by saying, and this is a Robert Wagner quote, he literally goes, psychological projections be gone, or something like that, or symbols be gone, and then everything else that you're dealing with is something of a higher nature. Within the dreamscape, and then it's helpful to ask for guidance. And I think again it comes down to resonance. I've never had any of the people that I've ever worked with have a bad experience in asking for guidance in a dreamscape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember Robert Wagner, either in his book or talking about a subject I'd like you to comment on. You said on a couple of occasions tonight about how you can make the dream symbols and imagery go away.
Right.
But not everything goes away. Something is left of a higher order, I guess. And I remember Robert Wagner talking about the people, the entities that were left behind seemed to have their own intelligence, that he could enter into a conversation and there was a separate intellect. It wasn't something coming from his mind. It was as if that's another entity of some sort with its own consciousness that's interacting with them. Have you ever had anything like that? Can you comment on that?
I have had that. It's very much something that I think is very possible in the lucid dreamscape. And I think that Robert Wagner, who I met actually on the Dream Conference, who's wonderful, he also says something which I fully agree with, is that you don't have, a lot of the time people think you have omnipotent control in the lucid dreamscape. You don't. And that's a really good example of it, that if you are interacting with another, let's just say non-physical beings, right? Another non-physical being, because in sleep, that's actually what we are. We are non-physical beings in sleep. For the most part, we're not sleeping with our bodies, right? Maybe that's up for debate, but let's just say that for this moment in time. So we are interacting with different levels of consciousness. And I think that's really where the spiritual pursuit comes in, and it's very experiential. And it's very amazing what will happen when you begin to interact with that, because you'll see things in your waking life that will follow through. There's a wonderful story that, and I share this in the book, in The Alchemy of Your Dreams, of a woman who is a very proficient lucid dreamer. And she's also a professor. I can't remember in what right now offhand, but she had a lucid dream where she met a Buddhist monk, and she just thought on waking that it was a meaningful psychological projection. She thought, this is the monk within me. And she worked in this lucid dreamscape with him for a long, long time, every time she could become lucid. And something like 10 years later, a decade later, she met that monk at a conference, and they recognized each other from the dreamscape. And so the lucid dreamscape is not only other dreamers, it is other levels, I fully believe this, of other levels of consciousness that we are interacting with. And I think if you look at any ancient wisdom tradition practice, right, the dream world is met with reverence. There's an understanding that when you're entering into dreaming, you're entering into something sacred. And I think that's why, because if you're looking at, if our perspective and where we place our attention and awareness is creating our reality. And that's something that quantum physics talks about, right? Because we're focusing on one possibility. So if our perspective is limited like that in waking life, and then you move into a dreamscape and you're seeing it from a higher perspective, that's highly, highly valuable. Because it means then in your waking life, you can go and do something and alter whatever is difficult. So.
There's an interesting book I read. The author's last name was Ziewe, Z-I-E-W-E.
Okay.
I think the book was Multidimensional Man.
Oh, I haven't.
He is a very experienced out-of-body traveler. But in his book, he also talked about using lucid dreaming as a stepping stone to be an out-of-body state, which kind of makes me wonder, this non-physical realms that we go into through lucid dreaming, through out-of-body traveling, but I get the impression that there's a lot of intersection, that when we die and where we go, the non-physical realms are not completely separate from the realms that we go into as a lucid dreamer or as an out-of-body experiencer. Would you agree with that concept?
Yes, and I think the more that I'm doing this work, the more that begins to seem more and more likely for me. So for example, when I wrote my book, I really wanted to stick to writing kind of what I had experienced on a first-hand basis, or what was close to me. And so when I looked at the dream yoga and Tibetan Buddhism, I'm not a Buddhist. I haven't trained with a Buddhist. So I just decided in the book, I'm going to leave that out, even though that is really where I feel the intersection lies. And so in Tibetan Buddhism, dream yoga, which lucid dreaming is one small fraction of, right? The concept is that you practice this dream yoga or lucid dreaming because in the moment, just after death, that they call it the bardo state. We can just imagine that that's an in-between state, is very much like a dream. It is exactly the same feeling, look, as a dream. And so when in that moment, if you can recognize, well, I'm dead, I've died, that's because I have the previous memory of what's just happened. I've retained my awareness in dying, which is really a goal for a lot of Buddhists. You can then choose to reincarnate differently, do it with more awareness. And then obviously I'm doing the very summarized version. A Buddhist will probably come here and tell you the very correct version, but that is the summary of it, right? So the intersection of it, it all begins to blur. And then if you look at shamanism, it again begins to prove that, you know, we are really traveling to places in our dreams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating to think about what awaits us, the realms that we have available to us. I remember Jürgen Ziwe talking about, and I think I read it in your book as well, with one of your clients, who Jürgen would intentionally go to visit his mother, his deceased mother. And in his initial travels, she looked the same as she always did. You know, she was an elderly woman in frail health. But at some point, things changed, and she now became this beautiful 20-something woman. He still knew it was his mother, but the physical image that she chose to display, she had learned that she could affect her image and her environment in this non-physical realm in ways that she couldn't in this physical realm. And I think you had a client who was kind of the opposite. He ran into his mother, and she was a 20-something, and I think it was Wayne Dyer, wasn't it?
Wayne Dyer, right?
I'd
Love to say that Wayne Dyer was my client. He was, but so he had an amazing experience. He had this spontaneous lucid dream where he was driving up to his mother's house, and I think the screen door wouldn't open or something, and it alerted him to that's how he recognized he was dreaming, because he recognized there wasn't actually a screen door on his mother's house. And she appeared as a much younger woman, and he was taken aback by that, and it threw him out of, I think if I recall correctly, it threw him out of his lucidity. And I think that also just goes to show about how strongly we hold on to our perception, and how not incorrect, because that's such a judgy word, so I don't mean it in that way, but how limiting that can be. You know, so if we have access to loved ones that have passed that we really want to speak and connect with, there's so many ways that I really feel that can happen in a dream, and it doesn't necessarily need to be in the image that we think it is in or has to be. Yeah.
Is it possible that deceased entities might choose to present themselves in a way that would minimize the confusion it might create, that they might choose to look the way the person remembers them to avoid what happened to Wayne?
I mean, the more I hear stories of people doing it and my own kind of experiences, I would say yes, that is it. My feeling is this, right? It's almost like we're playing a big game of charades, and I think the practice moves right through into waking life. So imagine we're trying to get messages across, and we're sending messages. I'm sending you a message, I'm sending you a message, but you're not looking at me, you're not paying attention. I'm going to do whatever I can to grab your attention, right? And I think that is, you know, that's where this divine intelligence comes in. It really is intelligent, and it's, I think, far more intelligent than we can even imagine. You know, so we're really good. I feel that that's where dreaming is also so incredible, that you see symbols and imagery specific to you nightly, and they're meaningful because of that. That's really what kind of blows me away about this bit.
So here's another thought that comes to mind. Anybody who's read Robert Monroe's books in his out-of-body states, in his earlier books, he uses acronyms about these INSPECs, INSPEC,
Okay.
that help him along on his journey. And the INSPEC stands for intelligent species. He thinks it's another entity, another intelligent entity. But in his later book, I think his last book, he comes to realize that the inspects are not separate from him. It's a higher self or a more evolved, his own self that's more evolved. So where I'm going with this is, we've talked about how we can get guidance from the dream state. Is it possible that that guidance is coming from our own higher self, that some aspect of ourselves, it's not just a God out there, although a source could be behind it, but it could also be a higher aspect of ourselves that's providing that guidance.
I would say it's definitely a possibility, and I think Buddhists would fully agree with you there, that is the ultimate journey in recognizing that you're behind it all. And so they talk about something called dreams of clarity or clear light dreams, and that is when you have gone completely behind any symbol, any image, any experience, and you're just in what they call union. I can't remember what the actual term is for it. And so I think that is part of the journey. Do I have the answer to that question? I don't know. No, I don't know.
If we had answers to everything, it wouldn't be a mystery. But
Right.
So I want to start moving in a direction of letting people ask questions. I'll start with a little of my own, and I want people to think, if you've got something in your own dream state that might help shed some light, you have questions. So I'm curious about premonition dreams.
Okay.
Over the last several years, I've had a repetitive theme show up where I'm in a house that I know I own, and that house is in bad shape. It needs to be repaired and renovated. And so I find myself thinking in the dream, okay, I got to start putting a plan together. I'm going to have to help rebuild this house for my family. One of those dreams took me to a lucid dream state. I had a huge hole in the roof, and it started raining. And as that rain came through, I was thinking, I wish I'd fixed that roof before. Then a landslide comes down and picks me up. And at that point, I'm riding the crest of this landslide, and I realize that, wait a minute, that's not what normally happens in a landslide. This must be a dream. And I became lucid in that dream.
Okay.
There was somebody sitting beside me, and I said, wow, this is so cool. This is a dream, a lucid dream. You know what that is? And I was getting into kind of an instructor, trying to help. So I had those dreams, and now I'm wondering, I mentioned that last October, this huge oak tree fell on our house. And I'm wondering if maybe there was some connection between that repetitive dream and this future event that was going to happen, or did you say that maybe maybe there's something else behind it, and it just happens to be coincidental that the tree fell?
I think that I would say that it's multiple things. It doesn't seem like you've obviously had the dream again since the tree fell, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think that will be the test in it, to see that if you have it again, because it's not so clear, right? I think when you have very dreams that are highly accurate in premonitions, the symbols come to you in a way that are very meaningful. And so I imagine that for you was it is meaningful, it sounds meaningful and significant in the way that you explained it. So I would say yes, that actually was. It also speaks to something big, though, that I think that I am learning, and something I actually didn't even write about in this book. The more that I feel that you begin to focus on consciousness and awareness, like you do with what you do, the more I believe that your psyche really tries to wake you up to lucidity. And so I would say, for someone dream work, right, when you have a dream of a house, most of the time, and I'm talking about it in a very psychological sense, our houses in our sleep tend to represent the state of our psyche, right? So you go into a house that is needing work, that could be very symbolic in saying there's something that you need to rearrange in the psyche so that you can feel more balanced. But the fact that it becomes a lucid dream is like, well, that's the way your awareness was getting you to wake up, right? So I think it's multiple, and I think a dream can serve in multiple ways, so that it
Yeah.
can be precognitive and helpful in getting, lucidity up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny that you talk about a house dream. I had literally last week, I had a dream where it was symbolic. I'm running through this house and I'm with a client, and I don't know who the client is in my sleep. And I'm aware of that, but I don't have like clarity around it. And I say to her, oh, we're in the house. The house is the psyche, like a good psychologist. That's what I say in my dream. Oh my God. And then all the doors start slamming shut, door. And then this terrifying figure, and my husband and I had watched the Antique Roadshow, and we had seen this like really weird dress in one of the stores, on the TV. And this woman starts floating through the corridor, and she's wearing a very similar dress. And my client goes, what is that? And I say, it's petrifying. I don't know. How am I in your psyche? And it triggered me to lucidity. And I think that's the thing, I really think that dream in itself could mean so many things. And when I woke up, I just knew that was the way my mind, my awareness was trying to reawaken, wake me back up, in not such a polite way.
Yeah. So I'll go back, and if anybody would like to bring a personal dream situation up, please raise your hand. If you don't know how to do that, I think under the reactions button, you can click on raise hand, and we'll try calling on you. So we've talked about guidance. I've found, I wonder what your comment is on this. When I wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm old enough now that I have to go to the bathroom. But when I go back to bed, I often have a lot of thoughts swirling around in my mind. Tend to be thoughts that are related to spiritual issues, book writing, and for a long time, it upset me. Why can't I just go back to sleep? But then I kind of accepted, well, maybe there's something more to it than that. So I started letting the thoughts flow instead of trying to push them out of my mind. I just let them flow. And after maybe a half hour, I'd fall back asleep, and I would just say thanks. That guidance is coming from somewhere. It's not these ideas that are coming to me, maybe coming from another source, and don't disrespect and discard them.
Right.
Was it Thomas Edison? I think he's just one example, but he had a process where he would put little metal ball bearings in his hand, and he'd be sitting at his desk. And he then tried taking a nap. And as he was shifting into the sleep state, his hand would release the metal balls, and they go clanging to the floor. And that period, I think what he called the hypnagogic state, I get the impression what he was doing was trying to see what kinds of creative ideas came up to him in that moment before he actually fell asleep.
It's a very helpful passageway, the hypnagogic. And I think, like you were saying about, waking up and then having all the thoughts that come up at that moment in time, I find something that can be very helpful is to close your eyes and then focus on imagery, not thinking. It is hard, but is something that is very, very helpful. And so I'd be curious to see what your experience with that is, because it shifts awareness from thinking into imagery, and then that leads you into the hypnagogic. But it's a whole other story.
Okay. Nicole, you have your hand up first. Do you want to unmute and pose your question?
Thank you very much. So mine is a two-part question. So I'm going to tell you what my dream, it's a recurring dream. I haven't had it in a while, but it has come up several times. And I've had other dreams that relate around death. but this one in particular seems very real, as if I have lived it possibly. And I actually spoke with a medium, and he said, like, in a past life, I was a priest, which was very interesting because this dream involves a church. And it's very interesting because there's actually two churches. One side on the left it's very dark, and it has a graveyard in the front, and it's very creepy and scary. And then the one to the right is very light and like angelic. And for some reason, most of the times, I think it's only one time, if I can remember, I've ever gone to the very light angelic church. I always go to the dark and scary one. And when I enter, there's a funeral happening, and I just walk by it and try not to look at it and go into the chapel. And I did have a chance to go to like Westminster Abbey, and there's like a section of the church. And even when I went there was like a feeling, I tried to dismiss it, so I can't even remember how it was, but it's very, it was very powerful. So my whole thing is not only to try and interpret that dream, but also just for me, where do you stand as far as like you're going with your intuition, or just maybe like searching online and trying to put all the symbols, or like in books and putting all the symbols together? Where do you try and bring that all together so that I can understand what is happening?
I think that this is such a great dream example. Thanks for sharing. There's two things here that come up for me, right? The first one is that ultimately you are the authority of your dream. Every single person here, you are your own authority on your dream. And so I think that intuition is such a helpful ally when it comes up to being a repetitive dream. There is something in your, depending on your belief system, let's say your psyche, your soul, your spirit, that wants to awaken you to this specific narrative, to this dream, right? So if it is a past life memory or a dream of a specific place, or you feel the need or the impulse, right? I like the word impulse, the impulse to go online and have a look, and you've been to Westminster, and you can feel that there was something there. I would say follow that, right? And a great way to follow that is to take out pen and paper, write the dream out, and then see where your mind naturally takes you into the story and see what happens. And I think going into the frightening church is actually very helpful, because during the day we walk around, we all do it, we have to do it, it's coping mechanisms, right? We have things to do, you have life to do. It's very hard to confront things that are difficult a lot of the time in waking life, and so anything repetitive that comes up needs to be looked at. And so the more you pay attention to it, and the more you work with it in whatever way feels good, then it should balance out and dissipate. Something I'd also do is say, if I could change this dream, I would walk into the church and I would look at the funeral, I would look at the coffin, I would see, what do I see? And then I would take it like that, and I would do that in a way that's very safe and comforting. So in waking life with pen and paper, when you feel ready to do it. And then if you can lucid dream, you could also incubate that. But I would say have a few lucid dreams under your belt. So I'm not sure if that's helpful.
Good.
Yeah.
Ruth, you have your hand up.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Ruth, you have to unmute.
Okay, thank you. Sort of related. What's your opinion about how medication can affect dreams, like the medications that you're on? And I have noticed that since COVID, and I had it before there was a vaccination, before there was a vaccine, have just had outrageous dreams, wild, much more dramatic, but that has been since COVID. But what is your take on how medication affects your dreaming capabilities?
So there's two things here. I think COVID collectively woke up people to dreaming. And I think that happened on a mass level. And I think that's why dreams began to tend. And I think people who are sensitive or intuitive have had crazier dreams. So that's a personal belief that I hold about that, right? In terms of medication, I think that it's multifaceted, right? I ultimately believe that your awareness and consciousness is stronger than any form of medication that you can take. And so if you go in with an intention to recall a dream and remember it, even on medication, I believe that that is possible and actually quite easy if you approach it in that manner. But that said, I also know from personal experience, for example, of taking a sleeping tablet, how insane that can feel in terms of dreaming, in terms of the freneticism. But I don't take sleeping tablets, but when I did, right, I took them because I was struggling in my waking life to feel calm. And so it filters through into everything. But, you know, if you're on chronic medication or something like that, I think your awareness is stronger than any form of medication and shouldn't really be an issue.
Thank you.
Carol, can you unmute, please?
Just a second. Okay, can you hear me?
There we go. Yep.
Okay.
I just had a comment about premonition dreams or dreams about the future. I think a lot of people can have them, especially if they're trying to become aware of their dreams and so forth. This happened especially to me back in the 1990s. At that time, I was in a religious community where they really focused on the power of dreams and healing and so forth. And that was before I became non-religious. But at that time, it opened me up to explore. And I started having periodically dreams about situations that were pretty horrible. And one in particular, I don't know if you all remember the horrible attack of the terrorists on the school in Beslan, I think it was Ukraine, many years ago, where they took all the teachers and the children hostage. Well, I was seeing this happen in a dream, and I just thought it was horrifying, but I didn't realize that it was something that was going to happen. So this happened several times before. I thought there must be something I can do, you know. So I literally, since then, if I get something like that in a dream, rather than be passive about it and later say, oh, wow, I dreamed about that, I pray against it, you know, whatever you consider prayer to be. You know, I'll just say, I ask for the highest and the best. I ask that whichever individuals are planning this or you know, that the tree that is going to fall on the house, that it will be moderated or perhaps not happen at all, that, you know, light and love will prevail through it. And I really think we have the power to affect things like that. That said, other areas of my dream life, I had a dream about my father recently who died years ago, and I haven't dreamed about it, saying, Carol, I've written you several letters and they're out there in the muddy yard. You need to go get them and read them. And I've been still praying about that thing, you know, trying to be open to what that means, and I haven't gotten any clarity. So there you have it.
Well, I love everything you just said.
Oh my, but I appreciate this discussion because it's just a big arena with a lot of puzzling questions.
Right.
A lot of potential.
Sorry.
Yeah. What's that?
All right. Athena, you have a comment?
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. I was saying I couldn't hear you, Jim.
All right, well, let's move on to Daniel. Daniel's got his hand raised. Daniel, unmute yourself, please.
So thank you for this conversation. Very interesting. I've been extremely interested in dreams for a long time, as in the book of Daniel. But I've had at least a few lucid dreams. One of the problems I have is that as soon as I realize, oh, I'm dreaming, I tend to wake up right away. Now, there's been a case or two where I didn't wake up right away. And for me, one of the dreams I tend to have is being in a building and not being able to get above the top floor. And so then when I realized, a couple of times I realized that I was dreaming, and I tried to, get myself past that barrier. That didn't work. But lately, here's where I really want to get to. And I really enjoy dream interpretation. I think I understand the symbology of the subconscious, and I've gotten a lot of value from interpreting the involved dreams that I have when I have them. But lately, what I've noticed is, so in the morning, I'll wake up, or my wife will wake up, and then I'll go back to sleep, or I will meditate. And so I'll sit there quietly and go into a meditative state, and then I'll open my eyes, and not too long ago, my wife said, "Oh, you were snoring pretty good." And I was like, wait, how could I be snoring? I was just thinking. And so now I've started to ask her, when I become more alert and not just thinking or meditating, I'll say, was I snoring? And I'll be like, immediately, was I snoring just 2 seconds ago? And she'll say, yes. And I'll be like, that's so weird. So I'm in this weird state. So there's awake. I don't know, we'll say awake. Then there's this state where my body is apparently asleep, but my mind is not fully asleep. My mind is thinking, but it's not in the dream state. Have you heard of this? Do you know what this state is, and how I might be able to work with this to expand myself?
So this isn't shameless self-promotion, but I write a chapter on this in my book. And the only reason I'm saying this is because it's helpful to know the practice to walk through. But pretty much what happens, right, is on waking, and so you wake up, and then you're going back into that meditative state, and then you're in the in-between. That in-between from wake into dreaming it's called the hypnopompic state. And so what's happening, right, is your body is asleep, but your awareness you've managed to retain it, but you haven't realized that you've gone through the passage, right? And so next time, I would say focus on imagery, not thoughts, which is what I was saying to James. And that makes sense to people who are in the in-between. So when you're closing your eyes, say, for example, this is a really good practice that I never understood, actually. A yoga teacher taught me this when I was like 16. You meditate on the image of a candle, and you do it where you focus on the candle being here, right? And it's actually a yoga nidra practice. And you think of the candle, that's all you do. And you do this in your waking life. But in this in-between state, that's very, very helpful, because if you can focus your awareness on that point with your eyes closed, so you're going to have thinking, but you're focusing here, and that's hard to do. It's hard to do, right? You're focusing here. You will see that if everyone does this now, you just close your eyes, right? You'll see that you can kind of make out shapes and lines. I don't know if people can see that. It takes a bit of time. But did you see it? Like when you close your eyes, kind of?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
So I have an issue where my ability to visualize is pretty limited, and I have to be in a pretty full dream state to have a visual. Now, I've even gone into deep hypnosis with myself and others, and visualizing is very challenging for me until I'm in a full dream state.
Right. And so that's also fine, right? So with this imagery, the candle practice then will become irrelevant to you, right? But then you just focus on the same spot and just watch what appears. And that's actually one of the tricks to it, is to not control the imagery. And so the candle practice is helpful in focusing awareness, and then you have to move into soft awareness. So what will happen, I don't even know if this is making sense, but it will make sense when you go through it, right? Okay, so you're going to go from wake into thinking, and then you're going to see imagery form. You'll understand what that means when you'll see the shapes forming, and you're going to go into the dreamscape. And so it will go from being flat, like an image, into 3D reality around you. And it's not like it forms around you, it's like you step into it, right? So I would say carry on doing this practice and trying to wake yourself up so you don't fully fall into sleep. And that would be very, very helpful.
If you ever went to the Monroe Institute, what you just described, Daniel, is focus 10.
So
Body
that's
asleep.
10. Okay.
Body asleep, mind awake.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
All right, Jeanette's got her hand raised.
Thank you.
Jeanette, how are you? You have to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, hi there.
Hi.
I'm so glad that you came on because I've been trying to jot my dreams down for years. I have this book of all my dreams that I've been writing in here, and one that really stood out to me I thought was kind of unique. And I was dreaming, and I heard a man singing, like it sounded like opera in my dreams, and I assume it's a dream. And he was singing so beautifully, and I like to sing too, and I was humming along with it. I thought, I'm gonna just start humming, and I was going like just saying la 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 la, trying to be in rhythm with his music. And when all of a sudden I found myself in this room with this guy walks in. He's tall and slender with dark hair. He has like a bag of groceries in his hand, and he plops it on the top of the refrigerator. And I look at him like, I'm thinking, is he the one who was singing? And we talked about something, and he plops in this chair, and I'm looking down, and he has this like laptop open, and I saw nothing but like goats were on the computer. And I'm like, let's see you work on a farm. And anyways, I just, I woke up and I'm wondering, did I actually have a dream, or did I have a spiritual contact? And the guy seemed familiar, but I didn't know who he was, but he seemed familiar to me. And that was the first time I've ever really had a dream where I heard somebody singing in my dream. It was completely black, but I heard somebody singing, a man's voice singing opera. And then I joined in with him, and it took me to like this other realm. And I just thought that was kind of unusual. And I wasn't sure what to make of that because I've never had that happen before.
I think here is a great, your dream sounds wonderful in that it is so meaningful for you, right? And it definitely could be an experience like you're saying. And I think you know the answer to that. So I think if I put an interpretation onto that, it minimizes it. I feel like if you have dreams, and this is something that I forgot to mention earlier, so I'm glad it's coming up, right? If you have a dream like this, and you feel like you've met with a guide or something that it feels really special and meaningful, right? A really helpful practice that you can do is the next night whenever you want to focus on it is just before you fall asleep, set the intention to meet the same dream figure and see what comes up in the next few dreams. And I think that's a really helpful way of being able to interact with that again and see what comes up. Sometimes also in dreaming, just from our own subconscious, our own psyches, we can meet figures that feel unknown, but they're actually very much part of ourselves. So that's learning the art of it, differentiating between what's coming from me and what is potentially something else. So exciting.
Yeah, and I have a tendency to have dreams with water that have to do with water, like dolphins swimming around me, and I'm laughing and giggling, and I can feel their fin up against my leg. And then when they leave, then I'll have like sea turtles coming in and swimming around me, and I'm just laughing and it's so playful, and even to the point where the water will push me up into the air itself and then drop me down. And seeing a whale under the water, in the water that's very clear, and a small boat of people are right above this, and I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, it'd be great if the whale could jump out of the water. And as soon as I think that, it jumps out of the water, and the people in the small boat are in awe, but it doesn't really make a splash. You know, I think it would make this big splash, but and flip the small boat over. But as I'm watching this, it goes right back into the water, and I don't even feel cold or anything when I'm in this water, and I'm just watching this. I love it when that happens.
I was going to say, sounds like a really great dream, right? Sounds like high vibrations, just having a good time. There's also a lot of triggers for lucidity there, recognizing that you're not cold in the water, that the whale should splash. So I think also in some ways that's being on the border of it. If there are any Abraham Hicks fans listening to that, they talk about how your dreaming really shows you what's in your vortex, right? So if you're in a state of feeling elated, happy, good, at peace, you know, and you have a dream like that, I'd just wake up and take it, you know. I'd be like, thank you very much. That sounds great. More of that, please.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
So,
Mark Brooks, you have a comment you want to share?
Yes, thanks, Jim, and hi, Athena. This is more just a comment than a question. Is, you know, in the work that I've done, I ran across Stephen LaBerge's doctoral dissertation at Stanford University, and he actually proved that lucid dreaming was a real thing through laboratory experiments. So for anybody that was on the call wondering if this was a real thing, just from a physical standpoint of consciously waking up in your dream, Stephen LaBerge proved that in 1980 as part of his doctoral dissertation at Stanford. All the extra things you were talking about, I don't think he did, but just the fact that lucid dreaming is real, I just thought I would mention that for people, because some of the things we talk about are really far out, but this is one of the things that's closer to science.
right. Thanks for mentioning that. I think that's actually hugely helpful to know. And I think lucid dreaming as a practice is spoken about in you know, many ancient wisdom traditions, and the West in particular. We're only catching up with that knowledge now. So and he's a wonderful pioneer in building the body of research, so that, you know, other teachers like me can just lean on that and then do the dream work. So yeah, thanks very much for mentioning it.
I'm going to post Athena's website in the chat. Athena, I'm going to start bringing this to a close. I wondered, you have some services that you provide, a 9-month depth, what do you call it? You know, can you comment about that and tell us a little bit about, and do a little self-promotion here?
Thank you. So yes, I run a 9-month dream program called the Dream Weave, and the intention for this group is very much for people to learn to work with their symbolic dreams in community, but also to really take their dream practice into the lucid dream state and begin to become proficient in that in a safe way. We attempt to dream as a group. That is something that we do, and we manage to do it. So my previous groups have managed to do that. And so it is a 9-month process. We go into, it's set up with different themes per month that build on one another. And it's very much for anyone who is really ready to dive into the work and do it. And so if anyone's listening to that, and that sounds too intense for right now, then a great place to start then is with the books, and then to see if you want to come back. I'm also planning on doing some retreats, but that's only going to be later this year. So the Dream Weave's the main way.
Yeah, take a look at her website. Keep an eye open for, if you're interested. I would second what Athena just said. Read the books, and you'll get plenty of tips on how to start a dream journey. And if you feel so called after you've had a little experience, you may find that these kind of intense support that Athena offers would be really helpful.
Thank you.
So, all right. Well, it's been an interesting evening. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, Athena. We've had a nice group of people here and some good questions posed. We have some events coming up later this month. Let me see if Mark, do you recall what we've got?
Oh
Here we
boy.
are.
Well, I was going to say next week we have Kathy McDaniel, who's going to be speaking in a joint conference with Metaphor.inc, and it's metaphor.ink if you want to look it up online. It's the community for spiritual and metaphysical authors that we have as part of Consciousness Cafe. And she's going to talk about podcasting. We're doing a 2-month focus on podcasting, and she's going to talk about podcasting from the podcast guest perspective as a way of marketing your book. And if you look in the meetup.com event description, she'll talk about the different sources that you can go to or resources you can go to become a guest on podcasts. But over the last 2 years, she has been on over 90 podcasts and radio shows promoting her book. So she's going to have some great things to talk about if you're an author or if you're a budding author interested in writing something. I encourage you to attend. And in February, on February 21st, we have the host perspective of podcasting, and we have the co-hosts of the Metaphysical Skeptics podcast on to talk about podcasting and how to get set up for it, how to do it, and what they look for when they look for guests. So I hope you'll join us for both of those. And Jim, I know we have one more coming up in 2 weeks, and I forget.
The 31st, I'm going to be interviewing Shannon Torrance. Shannon has a podcast program, and this will be the first time I've brought somebody on who is a podcaster. I wanted to find out, all these people you've interviewed, what are the things that stood out in her mind? What are the most interesting subjects that she's been exposed to? So I think you'll find that on the 31st at 7 p.m., that'll be an interesting evening to see what she has to say about her journey. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Jim, it's been wonderful. And everyone, thank you so much. It's been wonderful spending a couple of hours.
It's great. I think it's wonderful what you're doing. We're on the cusp of building something different. We have so much fear and animosity that's floating around. If we can find ways of encouraging one another, encouraging our circle of friends to become aware of who they are, that we're not just human beings having one life and that's it. And if more people understood that and realized that their implications, how we live our lives in this physical time frame we're in, can have an impact on the quality of what we experience when we move on. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. We'll probably get this recording posted maybe by tomorrow. So thank you for attending tonight. Thank you, Athena, for being here.
Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Okay.